Mary called and said my son drowned while taking a bath. I rushed to the hospital, but my son had already stopped breathing. Mary was sitting on the floor, pounding her head in grief. My husband was sobbing, holding me, saying he could never move on from this. 6 months later, he walked in with a pregnant woman, impatiently saying, "It's been so long, we need to move on." I woke up to the day my son had the accident. I saw Mary pushing my son into the bathtub. Then I woke up again, hearing my colleagues discussing about having a team building event on a Sunday, when they were supposed to have a day off. I quit my job right after Jimmy's incident, but now it felt like I never left. I couldn't believe it was 2023, October 21st, 11 a.m. I had traveled back in time, half an hour before Jimmy's accident. The office atmosphere didn't match my memory. My colleague, in her smart dress and bun, didn't look like she was in her 50s. She was complaining about missing a blind date, because of the team building event. Confused, I grabbed her and asked, "What year is it now?" She looked at me weirdly and pointed at the wall, saying, "You feeling okay, Amy? It's all written there." When I looked up, it was indeed October 21st, 2023, 11 a.m. Realizing I had the chance to prevent Jimmy's accident, I couldn't wait. Without waiting for permission, I grabbed my bag and rushed home. Before I reached home, I heard Jimmy's faint sounds. Tears filled my eyes. It had been so long since I heard his voice. Since his passing, I would watch videos of him repeatedly. But my ex-husband had deleted them, thinking they were bad luck. As I pushed the door open, I saw Mary holding Jimmy's head under the water. I shouted and pulled Jimmy out of the tub in time, and he coughed back to consciousness. He didn't know what had happened, but the sight of him made me sob uncontrollably. After making sure Jimmy was safe, I let him lie down. Mary, feeling guilty, said she was just trying to help Jimmy's heart condition by training him to hold his breath. Even though Mary's actions were unintentional, I couldn't control my rage and slapped her hard. Mary was knocked off by me. She covered her face and stood still, then quickly came to her senses and cursed loudly. "Unbelievable, you jerk dare to hit me. I'll make sure you regret it." She reached out to grab my hair, but I dodged out of the way. I turned around, slapped her twice, then kicked her down, and forcefully pressed her on the ground. With a huge difference in strength, I had her under control and she couldn't move. She wailed on the ground. "Are you looking to die? Just wait until Peter comes back, see how he deals with you. You're the one looking to die." I sneered as I punched her repeatedly. "You hurt my son, I'll hurt you. An eye for an eye, fair deal, right?" "Bullshit." She pounded the ground and wailed, "What evidence do you have that I wanted to harm Jimmy? He's my grandson, who would believe such a thing?" This statement hit me like a bucket of cold water. Indeed, there were no surveillance cameras at home, and she hadn't caused any substantial harm to Jimmy. Even if I reported it, the police wouldn't be able to do anything. I instinctively let go of her. She immediately got up from the ground, holding her head and screaming loudly. "Jerk, just wait, dare to lay a hand on me, I'll have my son divorce you." Suddenly, I calmed down. My dad bought me a house before I got married, and after marriage, David talked me into selling it and getting a new one. The dowry money was used by David for business, and became joint property. Divorce? That would be too easy for them. Thinking about Susan coming back pregnant with David in just half a year, they must have hooked up by then. If I divorced, I would lose a large sum of money, while their family would reap the benefits, enjoy grandchildren, and live a comfortable life. Staying was the only way to ensure they received their deserved retribution. With this in mind, I kicked Mary's knee fiercely. She had chronic knee pain. As soon as I kicked her, she let out a scream like a pig being slaughtered. "Help! Murder! The daughter-in-law is going crazy." Peter came back that evening with a black face. Who knows how much Mary exaggerated things to him. He sat on the couch, slamming the table in anger. "Amy, why did you hit my mother? Don't you know she's not well? In the past, Mary always acted all caring in front of Peter, so we appeared to have a peaceful relationship. We never even argued. Peter never even said harsh words to me. Before, if he had talked to me in that tone, I would have left immediately. But now I knew that the way to deal with manipulative Mary was to be more manipulative than her. So, my eyes immediately teared up. "I'm sorry, honey, you know, Jimmy has a heart condition." When I came back and saw Mom pressing him in the water, I was so frightened and acted impulsively by hitting her. After marriage, I always called him by his given name, but within a few years of marriage, we were like siblings. Now, frightened like a deer, I held his hands tightly, with a pitiful look that left him speechless. After a moment, he turned away uncomfortably. Mom must have been just playing with Jimmy. She wouldn't harm her grandson, right? Yes. I lowered my voice and said softly, I was too impulsive this time. I know how much Mom has done for this family. Now that I've calmed down, I realize how wrong I was. I cautiously approached Mary, choked up, and asked, "Mom, can you forgive me?" "Oh, come on, no big deal." Mary waved her hand dismissively. "Mom knows, you did it for Jimmy and for this family. How can I blame you?" We looked like a caring mother and daughter-in-law. Peter nodded approvingly, said a few words about how hard he works outside, hoping I can be a good wife, and then went back to the room. As soon as he left, Mary followed suit, and I silently trailed behind. The two of them locked the door as soon as they entered the room. I had to get closer to hear their conversation. Peter clicked his tongue in disapproval. "Mom, seriously, why didn't you stop as soon as you heard her coming back? If she caught us, it would have been a disaster." "It's only because you can't control your wife," Mary said, sounding quite irritated. She continued, "When she was pregnant with Jimmy and did that 4D scan, it clearly showed that Jimmy had a heart problem. She insisted on giving birth, and the surgery cost a fortune. If you ask me, you should have just drugged her earlier to have a miscarriage." "Enough. I didn't know the disease could still be cured," Peter impatiently interrupted. "You better hurry up and solve this. Make sure to do it when Amy is away on a business trip next time." "I know, you better hurry up and make Susan pregnant soon. I've given up on Amy. Who knows what health problems her next pregnancy will bring," Mary reminded. "I know, you don't have to keep saying it," Peter replied. Their words felt like needles stabbing into my heart. Why should I end up holding a photo of Jimmy and feeling miserable, while their family can be happy together? Jimmy, my Jimmy. Now that Mom has come back to life, in this life, Mom will definitely take care of you. My initial reaction was to send Jimmy back to my parents. In the previous life, I noticed that Mary didn't like Jimmy, so as soon as my maternity leave ended, I sent Jimmy to my parents' house. But the next day, Mary showed up. In front of many people in the neighborhood, she dragged my mom, tears streaming down her face. "I came here specifically to bring my grandson, but Amy took Jimmy back without saying a word. If this gets out, everyone will think I mistreated Amy. How will I face others?" My mom always cared about her reputation. With so many people in the neighborhood watching, she couldn't bear it and quickly comforted Mary. Yes, Amy was wrong in this. I will talk to her later." So that day, my mom sent Jimmy back. Peter happened to be on a business trip that day, and Mary grumbled disapprovingly to me, "Forget about letting your mom keep the child. There is no reason to send your grandson to your mom's house. Whenever you take him back, I will come to pick him up." At that time, I really thought Mary was being considerate and wanted to take care of her grandson. Now thinking back, she probably wanted to quickly find an opportunity to kill Jimmy, so that she could make room for her future healthy grandchild. Even if I insisted on sending Jimmy back home, not to mention that Peter and Mary would resent it, my mom would also refuse. I secretly calculated in my heart. Mary always liked to take advantage of others. Especially whenever she heard about activities like free egg donation with blood pressure measurement, no matter how far, she would make sure to get there early. Thinking about this, I immediately joined several community groups to find out where there were free activities nearby. Among many advertisements, An event at a supermarket caught my attention, free haircuts, and a shopping bag as a gift. The supermarket was in a special location. If you took a bus there, it would take half an hour. However, if you went through the back door of the community, climbed over a wall, and walked for 5 minutes, you'd arrive. But because the community had recently been developed and road construction was happening outside, the back door of the community had already been sealed. The wall underneath also had moss growing due to lack of use. However, Mary would definitely choose to climb over the wall to save $2 on bus fare. The event was scheduled for tomorrow, and it happened to rain, which was really a stroke of luck for me. In the afternoon, while walking with Jimmy, I went to the supermarket and took a promotional poster. When I came back, I folded it and placed it on the outside door handle. Usually, after Mary wakes up from her nap, she has a habit of going downstairs to pick cardboard boxes from the trash. I heard her coming out of the room and opening the door, then there was silence. I couldn't help but smirk. She must be looking at the activity poster. During dinner, Mary indeed mentioned that she would be going out tomorrow. Peter, eating his meal, was clearly unhappy. It's going to rain tomorrow, where do you plan to go? Why not stay at home and spend time with your grandson? It's the weekend tomorrow, Amy is at home. I don't need to stay, she said, giving Peter a meaningful look. As long as I'm home, she won't be able to act, so I might as well go out. Fine, Peter relented. Just don't go too far, and be safe. Early the next day, just as the sky was getting light, Mary left home. I stood on the balcony, watching her with an umbrella, heading towards the back gate of the community, and kept thinking. If someone happened to be at the back gate, or if someone happened to be going to the same supermarket, Mary could safely get there with someone's help, and then the plan would be considered a failure. I played with Jimmy, silently praying in my heart. An hour passed, the rain outside was showing signs of stopping, but there was still no news from Mary. My heart sank gradually. Another failed plan meant I had to come up with a new one. Jimmy was getting impatient in bed, constantly calling out. I paced back and forth with him, feeling anxious. Another hour passed, and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock. Just as I was about to despair, my phone suddenly rang. The ringtone was deafening in the quiet house, and I eagerly answered it, only to hear Mary's panicked voice on the other end. Amy, come save me. I bit my palm, fearing I might laugh, and anxiously asked her what had happened and where she was now. She cursed angrily on the phone. She mentioned that when she was climbing over the wall on her way back, she stepped on moss and fell off the wall. At the end, she warned me not to call an ambulance and waste her son's money, that she would go to the hospital alone. I promised quickly. After hanging up the phone, I quickly took Jimmy to my mother's house and then leisurely made my way to Mary's location. Mary was sitting at the corner of the wall, soaked through, looking very disheveled. She groaned in pain while cursing. This damn property management, they don't even bother fixing the wall until someone dies. I coldly snorted in my heart. She was still the same as before, always blaming others when things went wrong. Even though there were signs posted on the wall prohibiting climbing, she still climbed and then blamed others when an accident occurred. Despite my thoughts, I couldn't help but rush over, picking her up hurriedly and shouting. Mom, how did you fall like this? Get up quickly, let me take you to the hospital. Mary, in pain, huddled in the corner. Amy, my leg is probably broken, I can't get up. Don't move Mom's arms like that, it hurts. Don't dislocate it again. When we arrived at the hospital in the afternoon, the doctor frowned upon seeing the report, and said the fall was serious, and she needed to be hospitalized. Once she was settled in, she reverted back to her unreasonable self, sitting on the hospital bed pointing at my nose and blaming me. What's wrong with your brain? I told you I fell, and you didn't bring the car over. Instead, you made me walk to the bus stop and take the bus. Are you a fool? Even a pig isn't as stupid as you. If it weren't for you, maybe I wouldn't need to be in the hospital. I stood aside, feeling guilty, apologizing. Mom, I called a taxi, but it was raining today, and I couldn't get one quickly. If you can't find a taxi, find another solution. She clenched her teeth in anger, and I hobbled for half an hour, almost breaking my bones, nearly crawling. Enough, sis. The elderly lady in the next bed couldn't bear it and spoke up. Your daughter-in-law has been working hard for you, what else do you have to say? I bet your own daughter wouldn't do as much. What does it have to do with you? Mary was about to retort when Peter rushed in anxiously. Mom, how did you fall? How are you feeling now? I broke my bone and need to be hospitalized, I said, feeling guilty as tears welled up in my eyes. It's all my fault. I should have borrowed a car from the neighbors when I knew it was this serious. Find a car from the neighbors? Isn't that embarrassing? Mary slapped her thighs and scolded, You're so stupid. Can't you think of taking your dad's car? Before we got married, my dad bought me a car that Peter usually drove. Watching Peter's brother, Jack, reach the age to get married, Mary would occasionally mention borrowing our car to let Jack drive. It's calculating. She's all injured and still thinking about our car. Mom, Amy has been through a lot. Please say less. Peter reprimanded her and arranged for a caregiver to take care of Mary. After taking care of everything, he was about to leave when Mary suddenly shouted loudly. Where are you going? Mom, I have something important to do. It's really urgent. Peter looked at her perplexed. But Mary looked coldly at him as if she hadn't heard. No matter what, you're not allowed to go. I don't care. During the day, you can use a caregiver, but at night, both of you must be here. Mom, I really have something important to do, I must go today. No matter how important, you're not allowed to go. Mary stiffened her neck, while the old woman in the next bed helped out. Their conflict was fully entrenched. If the neighbor's bed had something, she immediately ordered me to arrange it. When the children of the neighbor's bed got off work, they all rushed over, and she insisted we stay as well. Peter's face turned black in an instant. Unfortunately, Auntie next door was staring like she was watching a show, so he couldn't say much, and just walked out of the ward with his phone. I followed him and heard him hiding in the hospital corner making a phone call. I have something to deal with now. How about I come and accompany you tomorrow? On the other side, a person seemed very agitated, and their sharp voice could be heard clearly through the wall. Who delays a birthday by a day? Do you think I'm already dead or what? Peter, how could you promise me back then? Now, when things come up, you can't get away. Is it your nagging wife bothering you again? In my past life, I was not unfamiliar with Susan. Because she was pretty and pregnant, she often bossed Peter and Mary around. At first, Peter found it exciting and even praised her for being spirited. But after they got married, as time went by, he got tired of her and called her names behind her back. But when Amy found out that she was pregnant with a son, Mary advised Peter to endure it. At this moment, Peter furrowed his brow as the voice was piercing, so he moved the phone away a bit. After the other person finished venting, he whispered gently, Seriously, I have something urgent. My mom fell and won't let me leave. If you don't believe me, I can show you the medical record. The person on the phone kept scolding, making him feel embarrassed. How about this? I'll go talk to my mom again, and see if I can spare an hour to come and see you today. After he hung up, I casually walked out and said, If your company needs you, go ahead. I'll take care of mom here, it's fine. He was taken aback, as if he didn't expect me to let him go. For a moment, a flicker of gratitude flashed across his face, then he briskly went to ask Mary for leave. However, Mary was not so accommodating. She stood with her hands on her hips and scolded loudly, That old lady next door is waiting to see me embarrassed. You are not allowed to leave even half a step today. When Peter was caught between a rock and a hard place, he eventually went to the door and called Susan again. Through the glass, I saw him patiently coaxing her in a low, submissive voice, and finally hanging up, then transferring 10,000 yuan to Susan. At that time, I wanted to buy a 1,000 yuan dressing table, but he said I was wasting money. Now, he spent 10,000 yuan on the other woman without hesitation. It's really ironic. After dealing with Susan, Peter finally remembered me in the corridor. He walked out of the ward and sat down beside me, with a rare hint of gratitude on his face. "You've worked hard today. My mom is not feeling well, that's why she spoke harshly. Don't take it to heart." He leaned his head on my shoulder, and there was a hint of perfume lingering in his hair. I resisted the urge to push him away, and gently held his hand, saying, "Why would I quibble with an elderly person? We are a couple, it's what I should do." For night caretaking, only one folding bed was available per bed. Surprisingly, he left the bed and blanket for me, sleeping in the corridor himself. Mary didn't stay in the hospital for long before insisting on leaving. But her legs weren't strong yet. After discharge, with no caregiver around, she limped, so she ordered me to take half a month off to look after her. Without hesitation, I agreed. Mary was delighted to hear that someone agreed so quickly to such a demanding and money-saving task. Even Peter glanced at me twice, looking satisfied. "Amy, they say a wise wife brings less trouble. I found the right person." Thus, he went to work feeling reassured. On the first day of taking care of Mary, she said she was hungry. I hurried into the kitchen to prepare a bowl of chicken noodle soup, and in less than 10 minutes, I served it. As she sipped the soup, she made a sarcastic remark. "So you were hiding your cooking skills. I should have made you cook earlier. I've been taking care of you for so long for nothing." However, as she spoke, her expression changed. In disbelief, she picked out a clump of chicken feathers from the soup. "Are you blind? Can't you clean the chicken feathers? Are you trying to disgust me on purpose?" She knocked over the soup, pointing at me and scolding, "Are you brain dead? You didn't even clean the chicken feathers. Are you intentionally trying to gross me out?" I trembled in fear. I didn't know. I've never cooked before." She waved her hand and ordered, "Okay, from now on, bring all the ingredients into the room when you cook the next meal. I'll teach you how to cook." During dinner, she ordered me to chop the ribs. With a snap, the knife fell on the ribs without causing any harm. She got anxious. "Amy, put some effort into it." "All right," I exclaimed. I swung the knife hard on the ribs, but they didn't break, and the knife bounced off. The knife flew up to the ceiling, then back down onto the bed, just a finger's distance from Mary's leg. Mary jumped up from the bed in a panic, yelling, "Oh my God, you're causing trouble, you scared me to death." After shouting, she called her son again, crying, "Peter, come back quickly. Your wife won't feed me, and there's going to be a disaster in this house." When Peter returned, he was thoroughly irritated. He slammed the door to the room and confronted Mary, grumbling, "Amy has never cooked before. The fact that she agreed to take care of you is already good enough. Why do you have to make her cook ribs and chicken too? Mom, are you doing this on purpose?" His mother, exasperated, responded, "I am giving her a chance to learn. Otherwise, it will be takeaway every day in the future. Who can stand that?" But did she learn? We still had to order takeout tonight. "You keep delaying my work, and Susan is going to be upset with me because of that," Peter argued. Mary pounded on the bed, shouting, "Your mother is about to die, and you're worried about Susan. The doctor said I need to drink more nutritious soup. Let me tell you, if this isn't resolved, don't bother going to see Susan. Come back after work to take care of me." Getting even angrier, Peter said, "You just can't see clearly, causing trouble." Fuming, he stormed out, and coincidentally, we locked eyes at the door. He glanced at me awkwardly and said, "You don't have to cook anymore. Just order takeout." Head down, wiping away tears, I apologized, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault for not knowing how to cook. Mom can't even have a hot meal." With a sigh, he comfortingly patted my hand, "It's all right. Taking care of Mom is already tough enough. I'll figure out the food problem." After brainstorming all night, he ultimately decided to call Cindy and ask her to come. Cindy wasn't working and was at home taking care of her child, so she gladly accepted the offer to cook for Mary and earn $2,000 a month. Mary was delighted with this solution, saying, "Amy can't cook, but at least my grandson will be taken care of." Jimmy still has a lot of toys, so they can all be moved to my grandson. The next afternoon, Cindy arrived with her son, David, a lively 4-year-old. In the past, he either broke Jimmy's toys or put bugs in my clothes, making me uneasy every time I saw him. As he entered, smiling, he greeted me cheerfully. I quickly pulled him aside, gave him a chicken leg, and told him that if he behaved well, I would give him $50 allowance every week. His eyes lit up at the offer, and he eagerly asked how to show he behaved well. I gently guided him. You haven't seen your grandma in a while, so when you meet her, should you give her a big hug? With that, he darted off and burst into Grandma's room. Grandma was ecstatic to see him, and he was thrilled. With a burst of energy, he sprang over and leaped high before jumping into her arms. However, with a thud, Grandma let out a pig-like squeal. You little troublemaker, you fractured my leg. Despite being only 4, David weighed over 50 pounds. Initially, Grandma had fractured one leg, but David's weight caused the other leg to break as well. When Peter rushed to the hospital, his face was darkened with frustration. Clutching his arm, Grandma cried and complained, a good daughter-in-law brings prosperity to a family. All these problems arose just because your wife can't cook. Peter, feeling impatient, interrupted, whether it's one leg or 2, she still needs to rest in bed for recovery. It won't make much of a difference whether she rests a few extra months. Both your daughter and daughter-in-law are here. I've got to go. Angrily, Grandma declared, if you take a step out of this door today, I will no longer recognize you as my son. People nearby watched as Peter, annoyed, said, I was just having dinner with someone. I need to get back. Oh, so you were having dinner with your mistress, Grandma retorted. This caught Peter off guard, and he felt guilty. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I misunderstood you, thinking you were just a spoiled rich girl, who only cared about indulging in pleasures. Sympathetically, I waved it off, no worries. When Mom needs me, I can't refuse. In the middle of the night, Mary groaned that she needed to use the bathroom. I closed my eyes tightly, pretending not to hear. Annoyed, she punched me in the waist, cursing loudly, are you a pig? I need to go to the bathroom and can't hold it in. She got even more agitated, hitting me with another punch, you are a damn pig. I need to go to the bathroom, and I can't hold it in. Startled, I jumped out of bed, half asleep, ready to help her. But before I could reach her, it was like a dam broke, and everything came out in an instant. She broke down, slapping the bed in distress. Heavens, I'm old, and I just had a fecal explosion. Seeing a whole bed full of stool, I was horrified and hurried to help her to the bathroom. However, in the process, I slipped on the bedpan full of discharge, and we both tumbled into the mess. But before falling, I used all my strength to hold onto her, landing on top of her. Covered in the mess, she screamed in anguish, someone's killed me. Peter, help. Peter, roused from sleep, looked both angry and puzzled. He stared at the mess on the floor in disbelief for a good while before questioning, Mom, did you have an accident? Even facing her own son, her face turned red as she looked around, then suddenly fixed her gaze on me. Like she found the culprit, she raised her head and accused me loudly, it's her. She must have drugged me. I knew it was too good to be true when she agreed to look after me at night. She's just waiting to see me humiliated. Peter, incredulous, turned to me and asked, is what Mom's saying true? Did you really drug her? Smiling wryly, I reassured him, what are you thinking? Your sister cooked, your nephew served, and you poured water for Mom. I never touched anything. Even if I wanted to poison her, I never had the chance. He pondered for a moment, then turned to Cindy, did you wash the vegetables thoroughly? Cindy shook her head vigorously, it has nothing to do with the vegetables. My stomach isn't feeling well. If there was any issue with the food, I would be the first one uncomfortable. She had a point. In her previous life, every time Cindy ate the food her mother-in-law made, she would end up in the hospital. At first, her husband thought she was intentionally defying her mother-in-law, and they would have huge fights, but later they found out it was because the vegetables were not washed properly. Since then, Cindy took over the task of cooking at home. It's not me, and it's not Cindy either. However, her mother-in-law kept having incontinence episodes, which didn't seem like diarrhea. Suspicious, she turned her accusing eyes towards David. David was always mischievous, often bringing bugs back to spice up the food. Once I found a big green caterpillar in the food, which scared us, and I had a fever that night. Without Peter saying a word, David suddenly blurted out, "It's me. I put something good in Grandma's bowl." He took out a bag of white powder from his pocket and handed it to Peter, saying his grandma told him it was good and asked him to put it in his aunt's bowl. Thinking it was good, he must give it to his sick grandma first. Seeing what David was holding, Grandma suddenly screamed. She wanted to rush over, but her legs were weak, and she stumbled into the yellow liquid on the floor. Now, she was all smelly and yellow. Completely forgetting about her image, she sat on the floor, slapping her thighs and shouting excitedly, "You naughty boy. You slander me. Tell the truth, did your mother tell you to drug your aunt? You naughty boy, you do bad things and dare to blame your grandma." Hearing this, Cindy immediately dragged David behind her as if avoiding suspicion, and said unhappily, "Mom, stop talking nonsense. Why would I drug my sister-in-law for no reason? It's you who's using the kid as a tool. David was led astray by you." The mother-in-law's face turned red and white alternately. She desperately gestured to Cindy, wanting her to admit, but David suddenly exclaimed, "Grandma, why do you keep blinking? Are your eyes broken?" Even Peter, as foolish as he was, understood what was going on. His face turned completely dark, frowning and scolding angrily, "Mom, you're going too far. Amy has been taking care of you these days. How could you still think about drugging her?" Grandma's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, I quickly stepped forward and pulled Peter's sleeve. "It's all right, dear. Don't blame your mom for this. Maybe I didn't do something well and made Mom angry. It's my fault for not even knowing how to cook. Amy, this is not your fault." Peter, looking distraught, cleaned up his mother and let everyone go back to their rooms. But he didn't go back. Instead, he sat alone on the balcony, smoking one cigarette after another, looking a bit desolate. When I went over, he moved aside to make room for me. After finishing another pack of cigarettes, he looked at me, contemplating. "Do you think maybe my mom secretly drugged you when I wasn't around?" That's his mother after all. I naturally had to deny it. Blinking innocently, I said, "Oh, how could that be? Mom is not that kind of person." But he seemed lost in his thoughts and muttered, "Could it be that Mom secretly drugged you before, and that's why Jimmy has congenital heart disease?" I knew Jimmy's illness had nothing to do with his mother-in-law. But thinking of Jimmy, I fell silent. Busy taking care of my mother-in-law these days, I didn't know how Jimmy was doing with my parents. When I came back to my senses, I felt a warm breath on my neck. He buried his head in my neck and murmured, "Darling, why don't we have another child?" Laughing, I said, "I'm busy taking care of your whole family, and you're thinking of having a baby with me." I shook my head. "Mom's not in good health. I want to take care of her first. Let's talk about kids later." After hearing this, Peter looked somewhat guilty. He sighed. "I neglected it before. I never thought my mom would treat you like this. So, what do you want? I'll buy it for you." Looking into his eyes, I said affectionately, "Honey, I just want you to have a meal with me." He looked surprised. "Just that?" "Yes," I said, hugging him and acting cute. "We haven't had a meal together for so long. I just want to have a simple meal with you, can we?" This made him even more guilty, and the next day he booked a table at a restaurant with an average cost of $5,000 per person. For this meal, I dressed up, wore a dress I hadn't worn for years, and tied up my hair. He seemed nervous, and at that moment when our eyes met, I saw amazement in his eyes. The same way Peter fell in love with me at first sight. After meeting at work, he went crazy pursuing me. But after marriage, I gradually changed my tight waist cinching clothes to comfortable loose t-shirts, and he would come and go without any care. At this moment, he was amazed, but I just wanted to vomit looking at his face. During dinner, He handed me a box. Bought this on my last business trip. See if you like it. I opened it to find a sparkling necklace with a 5-figure price tag. This price, in the past, I wouldn't dare to think about, and he would never buy it for me. Perhaps, he bought it and forgot to give it to Susan. After all, it had been a month since his last business trip. I gladly asked him to help me put it on. I love it, it's something I've always wanted but couldn't bear to buy. I pecked his face lightly. Thank you, dear, you're so good to me. A tinge of guilt flashed across his face. During dinner, his phone kept ringing incessantly. Despite pressing the button to reject the call several times, the other party didn't seem to want to give up and kept calling one after another. After hanging up over a dozen times, he finally answered the phone in annoyance, saying, "Can't you understand? I'm really busy right now." I couldn't hear what the other person said, but he sneakily glanced at me, then covered his mouth and said softly into the phone, okay, I'll come see you tomorrow, fine." After hanging up, he explained nonchalantly, "The client is sick and insists on me going to discuss business in person, otherwise they won't place an order." I leaned on his shoulder and said, "You can go handle the business meeting, leave the house to me." Maybe feeling guilty, or maybe it had been a while since he saw me dressed up, I took a picture of us and asked him to post it on his social media. Surprisingly, he agreed. Peter got a babysitter, Mary had Cindy looking after things, and the house seemed calm again. But of course, I couldn't let them relax too much. The next day, Peter woke up early, shaved, and put on a tie. Probably thinking about the evening's date, he seemed to be in a good mood, humming a tune as he left briskly. Just as he left, Cindy also dressed up nicely and left. I knew where she was going. In a past life, Cindy had an affair with the old man downstairs. The old man's wife had passed away, leaving him lonely with only money. Cindy's husband was not only stingy, but also had a violent temper. So, under the guise of visiting her mother, Cindy would sneak out to meet the old man secretly. In the end, Cindy managed to get over $1 million from the old man, divorced her husband, and was living her best life. Anticipating the right time, I took out a spare phone and sent an anonymous text to Cindy's husband. Then, I texted the old man's 2 sons. After finishing all of this, I casually turned off the phone and listened intently to the commotion downstairs. In less than half an hour, Cindy's husband's angry shout could be heard from downstairs. "Cindy, come out. I know you're in there." Mary, hearing the commotion, extended her neck curiously. "How come I hear my son-in-law's voice, Cindy? Is there someone named Cindy downstairs?" I rushed downstairs faster than a rabbit. "I'll go see what's happening." Cindy's husband was efficient. He brought a few friends, and seeing that Cindy refused to open the door, they just broke it down. When they rushed in, Cindy hadn't even fully dressed. Seeing this, Cindy's husband flew into a rage, not giving her a chance to explain. He punched Cindy in the face, pulled her by the hair, and started slapping her wildly. He cursed, "You slut! How dare you cheat on me behind my back? I'll kill you today." Cindy, caught red-handed, sat on the ground, covering her face, and wailed, "Help, murder, is there no justice? Justice, I am the justice today." He continued to hit Cindy's face with punch after punch, and she ended up bleeding, her front teeth knocked out. A lot of people had gathered around to watch. I quickly called Peter. "Peter, something's wrong. Come back quickly, your sister is being bullied." As soon as Cindy mentioned Peter's name, she started shouting in distress, "Brother, your brother-in-law is going to kill me, come back and save me." Before she could finish, Cindy's husband grabbed her by the hair and dragged her outside, still swearing, "You shameless whore, I'll kill you today." The old man, who had never seen such an incident, got scared and fainted on the spot. Peter, going crazy on the phone, said, "Amy, stop him first, I'll be there soon." At that moment, the old man's family arrived. Seeing the old man on the floor, they thought Cindy had attacked him and immediately grabbed her, demanding an explanation. Cindy, battered, thought these people were sent by her husband, so she grabbed one person and started fighting back. With 5 or 6 people in a brawl, Peter arrived just in time. Seeing the chaos, he tried to pull Cindy's husband away. But Cindy's husband retaliated with a punch, then proceeded to kick Peter relentlessly. He gasped and cursed, "None of you are good people, I'll beat every one of you." Cindy's husband had some training and was used to fighting. He kept punching Peter in the stomach, leaving him unable to fight back, groaning on the ground in pain. Both Peter and Cindy ended up in the hospital. Cindy was lucky, only losing some hair and 2 front teeth. But Peter was in bad shape. Cindy's husband took out all his anger on him, causing him to suffer broken ribs, a broken nose, soft tissue injuries all over, a swollen face, and a crooked mouth from the beating. The old man's sons rushed him to the hospital just in time, as he had a heart attack from the shock, but managed to survive. In the end, even though things didn't escalate too far, the 2 sons were furious, thinking their father had been scammed. They demanded Cindy return the money, or they would press charges. Cindy, fearing a lawsuit, had no choice but to return the money. Mary fainted on the spot upon hearing about the incident, and had to be revived with a bucket of cold water by the maid. She wanted to go to the hospital, but was immobilized in bed and could only fret at home. Peter was in so much pain, he could hardly speak. Despite all the chaos, he still remembered his appointment with Susan today, and immediately started making calls as soon as he left the hospital room. "Sweetheart, I can't come see you again today." Yes, there have been a lot of things going on at home lately." "Yes, we can't go to the zoo again, but how about you wait a bit? I'm pretty injured this time, we can go see the monkeys another time." I couldn't hear what the other person said, but he furrowed his brow in impatience and said, "The house is a mess, can't you understand my situation? I know that monkey looks like me, you've said that so many times. But like I said, I can't go now, why don't you go see it by yourself?" Susan was still yelling on the phone, extremely upset with Peter's repeated cancellations. After all, Peter used to drop everything to be with her whenever she called. Peter listened, his face getting darker. It was easy to guess that Susan was accusing him of not caring, of not putting her first, of not seeing her for many days. She must think he had lost interest. After 5 minutes of silence, whatever Susan said must have touched a nerve, because Peter exploded in anger. "Damn it, you look like a monkey yourself." He hung up the phone in a rage. Honestly, even with all his later dissatisfaction towards Susan, I never saw Peter say a harsh word to her before his death. Behind the scenes of a happy couple in love, there's always someone taking care of all the messy things at home. I thought that with Peter constantly cancelling plans, Susan would come looking for him at the hospital. But I was wrong. Maybe it was seeing the group photos in Peter's social media posts, or maybe it was because Peter always had excuses lately and couldn't meet up. Susan couldn't hold back anymore, but she came looking for me. When I went back to get toiletries for Peter and Cindy, I was stopped downstairs by someone. And to my surprise, it was Susan. She wore a hat, a tight shirt, and jeans that accentuated her figure, with a stack of flyers in her hands. Even with a mask on, I could still recognize her anywhere. She thought I didn't know her, pretending to be a salesperson trying to sell me children's swim classes. I don't know how long she had memorized that sales pitch, but she was so convincing, making it seem like the real deal. Finally, she took out her phone. "Let's add each other on phone. You can think about it first or discuss it with your husband. When you've made up your mind, you can contact me." After talking for a while, she was really just trying to peek at my social media. Once she was far enough, I immediately posted on my social media. They say he went to several stores while on a business trip until he found the right one. My husband is so thoughtful. The picture was of the necklace Peter gave me that day. Before posting, I set it so only Susan could see it. Knowing Susan's temper, she's probably going to cause trouble for Peter again. Just as expected, when I returned to the hospital room, I heard Peter sounding a bit impatient on the phone. "Stop causing trouble, will you? I'm really injured. How could I have made up with her? Can you even believe that? Okay, I'll buy it for you, all right." He hung up and transferred 20,000 to Susan. I don't know what kind of spell Susan put on Peter, but from what I've seen, She must have gotten tens of thousands already. After he hung up, I walked into the hospital room. As soon as he saw me, he scrambled to hide his phone under the pillow and awkwardly explained, "Oh, it's a customer. Heard I was sick and insisted on visiting me. But there's a rule in our 3-bedroom that only one caregiver is allowed per bed, no one else can come in." Surprisingly, there's actually such a rule. No wonder Susan couldn't find him in the hospital. I asked him in surprise, "Did you explain it to her properly?" He nodded, explained it, and she's not coming anymore. As long as it's explained, that's good enough. I smoothly got up, stood in the most discreet corner, took a sneaky photo of Peter and me, and posted it on my social media with the caption, "Husband says, when you're at your weakest, you need your loved ones by your side. Leaving for a moment, and he says he misses me to death." Visible only to Susan. Not long after I posted on social media, Peter's phone rang again. He turned green when he saw the caller ID, then looked at me awkwardly. "It's a customer call, can you handle it?" "Sure, I'll leave first." I tactfully walked out of the room. Even through the glass, you could see Peter was almost losing it. Due to his face hurting, he could only lift half of his mouth when speaking. "Will you ever stop? I really can't have a second person come in here. Would you come and keep me company? Are you crazy? What if she sees you? If I don't let you in, I can't prove my innocence, right? Fine, I'll talk to her later." Outside, I was nearly laughing to death. A person who's the third party still needs others to prove their innocence to her. As expected, when I returned to the room, Peter cautiously spoke, "How about you leave at night? I'll find a nurse to accompany me." I hesitated. The hospital has already registered the names of the nighttime caregivers, and it can't be changed. "Can't be changed." His voice raised. In his excitement, it strained his wound, and he suddenly covered his face, taking a few breaths of cold air. "It can't be changed." I touched his hand emotionally. "Darling, don't worry about me getting tired. Taking care of you is the right thing to do." He stood there stupidly looking at me. After a while, a smile tugged at his lips, looking almost on the verge of tears. When he and Susan were discussing that I couldn't be replaced as his caregiver, I swiftly posted in my social media. I suggested hiring a night nurse, but my husband insisted he couldn't live without me and must have me by his side. Being an old married couple, we didn't feel shy about it. Not long after I posted it, Peter's phone rang again. From a distance, Susan's angry voice could be heard shaking the heavens. "Peter, you lied to me again. You bastard." The matter was settled when Peter transferred 50,000 yuan to Susan. Peter's wallet was like Doraemon's pocket. Whenever Susan needed money, he could always produce it. After we got married, he used all the dowry money I brought to dabble in various businesses. Though not as successful as others in big business, he should have saved quite a sum. However, no matter how much he earned, he never told me. Whenever I asked, he would impatiently say that it was his own money and I had no right to ask, and he could just take out my dowry money to give to me. As I was pondering this, Peter called me over to help him place a food order. He was very picky with his food, and after having fancy dishes all the time, he found hospital food hard to swallow. He handed me his phone, swiped a few times and said he wanted the lunchbox from Jack's, then asked me what I wanted, telling me to order something for us to bring back. I took the phone and was looking at the menu when a message suddenly popped up. "Hey, what have you been busy with lately?" It was Peter's brother, Jack. Jack had always been indulged by Mary, not having finished junior high and idling around with people on the streets. Sometimes he couldn't even afford meals, and would ask Peter for some money from time to time. It was said that he had recently gotten into gambling, which resulted in a lot of scolding from Mary. When I saw his message, it caught my attention. While Peter was resting his eyes, I quickly sent Jack a screenshot of a bank deposit and then promptly retracted it. Jack was instantly excited. "Bro, you have this much money?" Seeing that, I felt relieved. Calmly, I replied, "Sent it to the wrong person, what's up?" Soon, he replied, "Let me just say it, Bro Capone said he wants to take me in on a big project. If I invest 500,000, it'll double in less than half a year. Peter opened his eyes, staring at me in confusion. You haven't decided yet. I'm starving. Get on with it. I sent Jack a text saying to call me, then quickly deleted the chat history, and handed the phone back to Peter. Just as he took it and placed the phone on the bedside, Jack called. These days, Peter had been secretly calling Susan behind my back. At this moment, seeing that it was Jack calling, he suddenly put on a relaxed expression and put it on speakerphone. Jack's voice sounded excited. Bro, you're really this rich? I was about to ask you for 20,000, then I would ask Mom and Sis to chip in, but now you alone can settle it for me. Peter frowned, glanced at me slyly and said, Don't talk nonsense, I don't have that kind of money. You go ahead, what's the matter? Right? Okay, I'll keep it a secret. It's about that bro Capone, the one I've been hanging out with. He has some insider information and wants me to invest in a project. Bro, if you just lend me 50,000, I'll pay you back 70,000 within 6 months. Forget it. Peter scolded with a frown. That bro Capone you mentioned isn't a reliable person. You cut ties with him right now. He was about to hang up, but Jack urgently shouted, Wait, bro, how about lending me 20,000? You're so rich, you can definitely give me 20,000, I'll figure out the rest with Mom and Sis. Bro, please don't ignore me, this opportunity is too rare. Bro Capone said, if I don't come up with the money within 5 days, he'll find someone else. The more Peter listened, the more he frowned and finally said, Not a penny, the call is over. And that ended the call. I asked with some concern, what's wrong? Peter was still angry, saying fiercely, when will my brother grow up? Hanging around with these shady people all day, always borrowing money. If he gets in trouble one day, he'll probably still be counting money for others. Even though Jack was unreliable, he still listened to Peter. Over the years, if it wasn't for Peter holding him back, Jack would have caused big trouble. But being this clear-minded, that was trouble for me. Softly I said, then just lend it to him, it's just 20,000, not much. Even if it all goes down the drain, he'll learn a lesson, cut ties with bro Capone in the future, it might still be a good thing. He lifted his eyelids to gaze at me for a moment, finally sighed and said, You're just too naive. If he invests this 20,000, that bro Capone will only figure out ways to keep getting more money from him, and it won't be solved with just a few tens of thousands later on. He had a headache, rubbed his temples, then waved his hand, forget about him, go get the food first. After leaving the hospital, I called Mary. Even though she was bedridden at home, she acted like she had tasks to assign every day, either asking me to report Peter's condition to her, or asking me to buy this and that for Peter. As soon as the call connected, the old lady started shouting energetically. She complained that the maid had been difficult to deal with lately and was being tormented by David, asking when I would return to serve her. I told her that Peter would be discharged over the weekend, and subtly mentioned Jack asking Peter for money just now. Upon hearing that it was a loan, Mary instantly started scolding again. Jack never gives a moment of peace. He's into gambling again recently. Luckily, his brother has some ambition, otherwise who knows how much trouble he would have caused outside. How much did he ask for this time? I turned up the corners of my mouth and whispered softly. Borrow 50,000, but Peter said he only has 20,000. He asked Jack to find a way to get the rest from you. Get from me? Mary raised her voice in disbelief. Where would I get the money? Why does Jack need so much money? I'm not lending. I quickly added, Jack needs it for investment. Oh, and Jack said he has insider information this time. With an investment of 50,000, it will double in 6 months. Then he can pay Peter back 70,000 with interest. An extra 20,000. Even over the phone, I could feel Mary's eyes light up. So much money. Why wouldn't Peter lend it? Is he out of his mind? He said he doesn't have the money. He asked Jack to come to you and Cindy for help. Damn it. Mary was suddenly furious at the thought of being asked for money. He doesn't want to lend and pushes it to me. Wait, I will talk to him. When I returned from buying food, I heard Peter fretfully shouting in the ward, not lending, not lending. Jack's true colors, don't you understand, Mom? How can you always stand on Jack's side? Peter was getting his drip changed and his agitation caused the needle in his hand to drip some blood. Frantically trying to press it with his hand and also in a hurry to make a call, he inadvertently put the phone on speaker. Mary was yelling on the other end of the phone, "Lend. Your sister is in trouble, where can we get money? I don't have money either. You gave that girl money, why not lend to your brother for investment?" What investment? Peter frowned so much he could have squashed a fly, that's clearly gambling. If I give him this money, it's like throwing good money after bad, it's a lost cause. He used to gamble, not this time. It's an investment. Mary insisted, your brother rarely shows signs of responsibility, and he can give you an extra 20,000. Why can't you trust him this time? It's you guys I can't trust. Peter interrupted sternly, I'm not lending this money, if you want to lend, you go. Ignoring Mary's cursing on the phone, he hung up. Just then, Peter's phone rang again. He picked up and Susan's sweet voice came through, Peter, do you still have money? Transfer some to me again, this time I'll consider it a loan from me to you. My brother got that girl pregnant, her parents are causing a scene at our house. My dad suggested giving them 20,000 as a dowry and marrying the girl. Peter, already quite irritated, upon hearing this, became furious and cursed. Money, 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 that's all you think about. If my brother doesn't have money to get a girl, do you all think I'm a big fool? I've been in the hospital for so many days. I haven't heard a word of concern from you. All you talk about is money. He said angrily, I don't want to talk about this now, we can discuss it when I'm discharged. Seeing him hang up, pretending not to know anything, I quickly walked in, but he stared at me as if he didn't recognize me. After a moment of silence, he pondered, I realize, it's only when you face situations that you find out who is the most reliable. Susan didn't get any money today, and tomorrow, she would definitely take the opportunity to meet Peter when he was discharged. That night, I posted another update on my social media, my husband sighed, when trouble arises, I am the most reliable one. The accompanying picture was a screenshot of a large transfer record I found online. True to form, the next day when Peter had just returned home, Susan called, you must have been avoiding me these past few days. I don't care, you must give me 20,000 today. If my brother's girlfriend leaves, because of the dowry issue, I can't guarantee what my brother will do to you. In a past life, I had met Susan's brother at their wedding. He was a burly man, with tattoos covering his arms, and wearing a large gold chain around his neck, looking quite intimidating. But Peter had never seen Susan's brother before. He thought her brother and Jack were cut from the same cloth. Peter's face turned pale suddenly. Are you threatening me? Susan sounded pleased. I'm not threatening you, remember what you said. You'll treat me well, you'll be good to me and my family too. I've spread the word to my family. But now, not only are you avoiding meeting me, but also hiding the fact that you have money when my family needs it the most. If my brother doesn't come to you, then who else will he go to? He finally realized Susan wasn't joking and cursed bitterly, your brother is a loser. Talking about finding a girlfriend and making his sister go out to sell herself, he's really shameless. I'd rather marry your brother's girlfriend. Say it again. Susan's brother suddenly grabbed the phone, furious, and shouted loudly, Greenview community, just you wait for me. I didn't expect Susan and her brother to arrive so quickly. He came aggressively, a tall man at 1.9 meters, muscles bulging on his face, looking really angry, and he even brought a wrench and a bottle of wine in his hand. Peter realized he had messed with someone he shouldn't have. He turned pale with fear and started to limp around the room in a panic. He wanted to hide, but Susan wouldn't stop blowing up his phone, threatening to come upstairs and break down the door. Fearing that I would find out about this, Peter had no choice but to face it head-on. Susan's brother saw Peter, strode over, grabbed Peter's collar, and said in a loud voice, Did you call me a loser? Peter took a look at his brother's aggressive stance, and he was so scared that his legs went weak and he couldn't speak. His brother, seeing Peter acting like a weakling, threw him to the ground and looked him up and down with disdain, saying, "You act like a loser yourself, but dare to call others losers." He smashed the beer bottle against the wall and pointed at Peter, saying loudly, "My sister is pregnant now and it's yours. So, how are we going to solve this?" Peter was stunned and said, "This can't be." "I'm telling you, it's yours, so it's yours," his brother said, threatening him with the bottle pointed at his face. "Either you divorce and marry my sister, or you give me 20 grand, and we forget this ever happened. Otherwise, I'm making a visit to your wife." Although Peter had thought about divorcing Susan before, recently she kept asking him for money, making him hesitate. Plus, with Susan's brother looking fierce and menacing, he was frozen in place and seemed unable to think. He looked at Susan, then timidly glanced at her brother, and after a moment of hesitation, he weakly asked, 20 grand, can this really settle the matter?" "It can." "All right." Peter took out his phone to transfer the money to Susan. But after a few attempts, his face turned pale. In disbelief, he tried a few more times before finally looking up and asking tentatively, "Can I go upstairs for a moment?" Getting his brother's permission, he rushed upstairs, burst into his mother's room, and shouted, "Mom, did you take my money?" His mother, lying in bed, was startled by his sudden outburst and patted her chest in shock. "What are you talking about?" "I transferred 50 grand to Jack early this morning." Upon hearing this, Peter almost exploded with anger. He stared at his mother and yelled furiously, "Mom, didn't I tell you that Bro Capone is unreliable? Why did you give him the money?" "Oh, why are you shouting?" his mother said gleefully. "Didn't Jack promise to give you an extra 20 grand within 6 months? You'll make a profit from this money." Realizing that he couldn't reason with his mother, Peter took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "So, now call Jack and tell him I urgently need 20 grand, and I'll give it back to him in a few days." His mother reluctantly picked up the phone to call Jack. After numerous unsuccessful attempts, she started to panic. "Oh no, Jack always has his phone on him. I hope nothing has happened." Peter, whose phone was ringing repeatedly with calls from Susan, now had no time to think about Jack. He urgently said to his mother, "Mom, why don't you lend me 20 grand now, and I'll return it to you once I sort things out with Jack in a few days." His mother, displeased, covered her pocket and said, "Why do you need my money?" Frustrated, Peter pointed outside the window and shouted in anger, "Because you want me to have a son. Now Susan is pregnant, they're all outside, and her brother is asking me for 20 grand, or he'll kill me." Mary followed his gesture, and saw the menacing tattooed man outside the window, clutching a half bottle in his hand, and she was frightened. Panicked, she patted her pockets. "Mom, this isn't enough for 20 grand. How about this, you go talk to Amy, ask her to make room for Susan, and you can bring Susan home." Peter protested, "But the baby isn't mine." Mary was shocked and exclaimed, "What? How shameless can she be? If it's not yours, why are you afraid?" Peter was pacing back and forth anxiously. "I had a feeling something was wrong since last week. She kept asking me for money. Mom, you introduced me to Susan, and you transferred money to Jack secretly. Figure this out yourself. I'm done," Peter said in a resigned tone, leaving Mary dumbfounded. She stared wide-eyed and exclaimed, "I won't give it. I don't have money. Go ask Amy. Come up with any excuse. She's gullible and rich, she'll definitely give it to you." Unable to move from the bed, Mary picked up her phone and called me while shouting at Peter. I heard their conversation from the adjacent room. When the phone rang, I pretended not to know and entered the room to ask what was going on. Peter opened his mouth, not knowing what to say, before Mary jumped in. "Amy, Peter has some issues now. Can you go borrow 20 grand from your dad for Peter in case of an emergency?" Peter hastily nodded. "Yes, Amy. I'm having some business troubles now. Can you lend me 20 grand? "Oh no, 10 grand will suffice, and I'll return it to you once I sort things out with Jack." I looked at him coldly, and when he finished, I calmly spoke, "Peter, I want the truth." He seemed momentarily flustered, then clenched his fists tightly and remained silent. I approached him, gently holding his hand. Peter, we are husband and wife. You can tell me anything, even if you've committed a crime. We'll face it together. Surprised, he had a slight redness in his eyes and hesitantly spoke, his voice choked and hoarse. What if I betrayed you? I smiled at him. Men are never faithful. As long as you are willing to turn back, to come back home, I will be waiting for you. He lowered his head, wiped his eyes, looking very touched. I quietly stared at him until he calmed down, and then he told me everything about Susan. Including that Susan is a girl from the neighboring village of his hometown, and she chose to be with him to establish herself in the city. He also admitted that he was tempted by Susan and wanted a healthy son, so he accepted the girl arranged by Mary. He said Susan must not be carrying his child, because he had taken precautions before. I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't understand why he would hurt another child, just to have a healthy son. I couldn't understand how so many years of feelings could be easily shattered by a curable disease. I suppressed the complex emotions in my heart and weirdly looked at him, asking, "Now that I know, why are you still giving her money?" He was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up as he suddenly realized. Right? That solves the problem, isn't it? But then he worried. Susan's brother looks pretty intimidating. I don't know what he's capable of. What if he beats me up if I don't give them money? I squeezed his hand, comforting softly. If he hurts you, he'll end up in prison for sure. Do you think he would do something stupid for his sister? How could you be afraid of him? It's a society under the rule of law, what can he do to you? I smirked, he's not coming for me anyway, so I have nothing to fear. Peter didn't know, but how could I not know? Susan's brother had been in prison 3 times, and was just released not long ago. He was taken aback by my analysis, then took a deep breath and said relievedly, "You're right. Now that you know about this, I'm not afraid of him leaking it, and I really don't want any contact with that woman anymore. She's too disgusting, always asking for money." He sighed. With so much going on at home recently, I finally know who I can rely on. I looked at him and said, "Then I'll sue Susan to recover our joint marital property. Can I?" He hesitated a bit, so I added, "Mom transferred all your money to Jack. If Jack doesn't give it back, we won't have enough for next month's inventory. And besides, Susan and her brother are playing you for a fool, you're just going to let it go like this." With a dark look in his eyes, he finally nodded solemnly. "All right." Susan and her brother waited for Peter for a long time, but when he didn't show up, they got angry and started banging on the door and cursing outside. Mary was so scared that she hid in the room trembling. Peter was also a bit frightened. Thank God I told you everything, otherwise these two wouldn't have left with just 20,000. Susan and her brother made a scene at the door for the whole afternoon, but they didn't gain any advantage. In the end, they left grumbling. Peter quickly sorted out the lawsuit materials and sued Susan in court. Susan was furious, and on the day of the trial, she and Peter exchanged fierce insults. "You idiot. I saw through you a long time ago. You've been hiding away all these days, because you just wanted to have sex and leave." Peter wasn't weak either. "You want tens of thousands for every time we slept together. Who do you think you are, some high-class commodity? You deserve to be exposed as a freeloader." Their heated argument didn't change the court's decision, which ordered Susan to return all the cash transfers Peter made to her. Susan had already transferred the money she received to her brother. Now asking Susan to return the money was like making her brother spit it all out. Her brother couldn't take it, so on that day, he found someone to break Peter's arm in front of the courthouse, and even chopped off one of his fingers. Susan wasn't going to back down easily either. She turned all the chat records between her and Peter during their time together into a 30-page PPT, and posted it on the main gate of the business mall where Peter worked. It caused a scandal, and the mall became a hot topic, trending for 3 days in a row. Whenever someone passed by the mall, they would point fingers and curse a few words. It was all about this man having no shame, unwilling to give, but only take, and then running away. The business's reputation was damaged, and it started to affect their sales. They had no choice but to refund the rent to Peter and ask him to leave. Peter bled on the ground outside the courthouse. On the day he was rushed to the hospital for treatment, Mary received a call from Jack. The $50,000 he invested did earn some money at first. But later, Bro Capone tempted him to gamble with the profits, and not only did he lose it all, but he also ended up owing a lot of high-interest loans. He cried on the phone, begging Mary to give him $1 million, or he would be beaten to death by Bro Capone's men. Before the call ended, Mary was scared stiff. When she came to her senses, she tremblingly took out all her retirement savings, as well as the money Susan had returned to Peter, and handed it all to Jack to pay off the debt. When it wasn't enough, she thought of going to Cindy for a loan. But Cindy, knowing about everything, afraid of Susan coming after her, had already moved out with David overnight. Mary came to me asking for money, and I shrugged. No money. By the time I got to the hospital, Peter had already stabilized. He lay in bed, pale, staring at me, as if afraid of losing sight of me. Then, he smiled with relief. I'm lucky to have you by my side, or I would truly have nothing. Shaking my head seriously, I said, No, you really have nothing now. Then, I took out the divorce agreement from my bag. Sign it. Our son is mine, and let's part ways amicably. His smile froze on his face, and he stared at me in disbelief. What does this mean? Didn't you say you would wait for me forever? Seeing his naive expression, I said coldly, Peter, I used to think you were treating me like a fool, but now I realize, you are the biggest fool. I laughed. I could never be with you again since the day you and your mother planned to kill Jimmy. He was stunned. Upon coming to his senses, he slammed the table angrily and asked Amy if she had been playing him all along, knowing about Susan's existence. Amy quickly admitted it. He then questioned her angrily, asserting that he had cut off ties with Susan, without causing any harm to Jimmy or his mother, right? Amy stared back at him with a dumbfounded expression. He failed to see any fault in his actions, whether it was plotting, cheating, or causing harm to his son. Any of these alone would have been enough to condemn him morally. He clenched his teeth and stared fiercely at the divorce agreement, then suddenly smirked, declaring that he wouldn't sign it, and that they could keep dragging the issue on since he had nothing to lose. He warned Amy not to think she would have it any better, and that he could drag her down with him. Amy nonchalantly told him to do as he pleased and threatened him with a lawsuit. Amy spent over 3 months in court with Peter. Eventually, the court ruled for a divorce, splitting all the marital assets. This included the $500,000 Mary gave Jack, the shared marital property Susan returned, and the money Mary had later given Jack to pay off his debts. When the divorce decision between Amy and Peter became effective, Peter had no money left. In front of a notary, he wrote an IOU to Amy, and as he wrote, his eyes reddened. He looked at Amy, asking if they still had a chance. Amy remained silent. After about 5 minutes, he bit his lip, his eyes downcast, and bitterly said he had lost everything. His mother was ill, his sister had run away, his brother was irresponsible, and now he was disabled and burdened with debts each day he woke up. Jack, after Mary had redeemed him, became obsessed with gambling, racking up more debts outside. After the divorce, they had settled the marital home and split the money between Peter and Amy, but Jack had stolen the money from Peter, gambling it all away. Wiping his face, Jack choked up and begged Amy to let him stay by Jimmy's side, even if it meant working near Amy's home, or doing a delivery job, as long as he could see Jimmy. He sorrowfully knelt, covering his face and breaking down in tears, unable to express himself. Amy pushed him away coldly, questioning if he deserved it. She believed that a man who had attempted to harm his own son had no right to talk about regret. As Amy took back the IOU, Peter's voice turned hysterical. Amy, I will climb out of this hole. You think I'm just lacking money, but I'll prove you wrong. Ignoring the sound of something falling behind her, Amy walked away without looking back. She quickly sold the house, moved her parents, and finally stared in disbelief at the divorce certificate in her hand. It had only been half a year, but it felt like a lifetime had passed. With Jimmy now able to walk, he toddled over with a piece of bread in hand, offering it to Amy. She accepted it with a smile, ruffled his hair, and watched as he became overjoyed, pulling her to play. She then took out her phone, deleted all of Peter's social media accounts, and blocked his number. For her, rebirth meant redemption and a chance to change her fate. The darkness had passed, and she was ready to embrace a brand new life, while he, burdened with the debts of his past, would forever remain trapped in a dirty quagmire.